The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello everybody, Dan Tomaszewski here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another episode of The Stack where we focus on people, business, and technology. Now, today we are going to discuss some of the hidden costs associated with getting paid. Every year, MSPs are losing thousands of dollars in credit card processing fees. And I'm sure you know that. I'm, preaching to the choir here, but it's, there's relatively simple steps that every MSP can take to reduce these costs or even eliminate some of the fees. And we are going to talk a lot about that today. We've got a special guest. We have Victor Lopez, who is the founder of FlexPoint. And we'll go ahead and bring Victor in here. There's Victor. How are you doing today, Victor?
Hey, Dan, I'm good. Glad to be on here.
Glad to have you here. Life in the world of credit card processing. Maybe you have stats on this. It would be interesting to see where credit card processing fees fall as far as top expenses. It's got to be pretty high.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way, right? So like on average, right? And I'm just using round numbers here, but like on average, you would say between credit card fees, transaction fees, et cetera, it's about 4 to 5%, right? And so it really depends on the size of your business. If you're doing $500,000 a year, or if you're doing $1 million a year, right? It's still a percentage of that.
Yeah.
And so I was actually having a conversation with someone about this recently. And so like when you think about most MSPs and like what your target is for growth in a given year, right? Like most of us are targeting maybe 10% growth, 20% growth, 20% growth being like, that's a really good year, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, right, 20% growth of like $1 million, if you're doing like $1 million of revenue, well, there's this 4 to 5%, right, that probably represents at least one new client. If you were to go get one new client, right, in terms of dollar amounts, that you're paying in credit card processing fees. So that's kind of like how it's like almost like having one client hidden in your payment processing statements, right? Instead of putting all the work out there to go get one more client to increase your revenue by 4 to 5%, you can have, it's hidden beneath the processing statements.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, as many MSPs are looking, hey, how can I reduce some of my expenses? They look at a lot of things saying that, okay, I have this expense, but I can't get rid of it because I need this. I have this expense, I can't get rid of it because I need it. Oh, wait a minute, credit card processing, I can't get rid of that, but that's something I could reduce the costs. Yeah. And repurpose that money to help drive the business forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we all have fixed costs in our businesses, right? And I think actually a lot of people consider credit card processing fees as being just the cost of doing business, right? It's just the 4% tax to Visa and MasterCard. The reality is, and we'll talk more about this, but like the reality is there are things that you can do to either reduce that pretty dramatically or eliminate it altogether. And I think a huge misconception there is like, well, I have to stop taking credit card fee. I have to stop taking credit cards if I want to eliminate credit card fees. But we'll talk about that. But it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. I mean, people expect that it's a standard. I mean, it's the days of getting checks in the mailbox are long gone. Yeah.
We're not advocating a reversion to checks here now, but there are other ways for sure.
Yeah. So when we talk about the cost, how much do most MSPs pay in credit card fees?
Yeah. So we have a lot of data on this, right? So we have a lot of data both on our partners, but just kind of prospective partners who are kind of looking to optimize this, right? And so I'm just going to throw some quick stats at you, and I'm going to kind of jump into 3 different buckets. So I'm gonna look at a $500,000 annual, sort of revenue MSP, $1 million MSP, and then a $3 million MSP. Sort of covers the broad spectrum of where most MSPs are, right? So an MSP doing $500,000 of revenue is paying, again, this is on average, $9,750 in credit card fees. So these, it's pretty substantial, right? $1 million MSP, just under $20,000 in credit card fees. Now, if you're talking about a $3 million MSP, that number gets closer to $60,000. So again, we're looking at, that $60,000 you can probably find in a lot of places, right? A pretty, maybe entry level, level 1 tech or something like that,
right?
For that amount of money, right?
Yeah, there's so many things that we want to do in our business. Ways to be more efficient, more productive, more profitable. And, a lot of times, money holds us back, right? Because, there's expenses. Some of them are just the way it is, but others can be controlled. But it doesn't change unless you change it, though, right?
Yeah, you got to do something. Yeah. Well, I'll take it. I'll take it a step further, right? You got to know that there's a problem. And so what we find, and again, I'm just kind of sharing our experience over here, but we often find that, a lot of MSPs don't know the magnitude of, how much they're actually paying, whether it's because, payment processing itself can be pretty, hard and opaque to really understand where the different fees and everything go. So sometimes it's hard to even figure out like what the magnitude of the problem is. So I would honestly, I think a great step one is to just sit down and try to figure it out in terms of like what you're actually paying, because you'd actually be surprised that a lot, and I'm talking about 7 out of 10 that we run into can't actually quantify the dollar amount of processing fees that they're paying.
Right. And, I think what happens too is for a lot of MSPs, and I feel like a broken record. It's so cliche that, they're working too much in their business versus on their business. Right. They're caught up in the hustle and bustle. They're actually working tickets. They're doing things that keep them from being able to sit down in a conference room, grab those numbers, really dig deep and look at those numbers from a granular perspective. They're just too caught up in the MSP.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as a business owner, I have all the sympathy in the world for those situations, because even though it's cliche, it's very much a problem for all of us. It's being able to spend time to be proactive rather than reactive, right? And this is one of those things. It does take time. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Like a QuickBooks, for example, makes it really hard to like break down what you're actually paying in payment processing fees. So unfortunately, yes, you need the time to sit down and kind of look at this and try to optimize it. But at the same time, it's it does almost feel like you're sort of out on a journey trying to uncover the truth here, because it's so hard to parse through the different the different fees and the different statements.
Like reading a legal document or reading tax code.
Yeah, seriously, like sometimes, eventually, right? They make the joke of the tax code is so complex that you have lawyers that only do tax. You have accountants, CPAs too. Maybe one day they're going to have lawyers that only focus on payment processing.
Yeah. So what are some ways that MSPs can reduce those credit card fees?
Yeah. So like I said, I think the first step is definitely understanding like the magnitude of the problem, right? Like how much is this actually impacting your business? And so we've seen everything from relatively small fees to 4 or 5% across the board. And so I think the first step is understanding the magnitude of the problem and sort of where it's happening. And then in terms of just different strategies for optimizing, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions is also, if I'm trying to reduce credit card fees, then that means I have to stop accepting credit cards, right? And that's not really the case. I think that's actually incorrect for the most part. I think what really helps to reduce credit card fees is actually providing multiple payment options to clients. I think giving the option to do to pay via different options is actually more effective. And so generally what we recommend is two things. So there's the approach where if you want to continue to accept credit cards and you want to continue to sort of subsidize or sort of take on that fee for clients, right? That's part of your client relationship with it. Maybe you've built it into your contracts, which is kind of always step one for us. If you just add it to your pricing as part of your annual increasing of your rates or escalators within your contracts, that's always the best approach, right? Like that's always the best approach. It's always going to be add it as part of your service, just increase it within your service. And your client, they're just going to assume, but sometimes it could be a lot. Sometimes 3-4% added to your annual increases might make it a little more difficult. So but that's always what we recommend as a starting point. If you are though going to be paying credit card fees, what we always recommend. So there's kind of two approaches when it comes to credit card fees. There's like a fixed fee approach, where you generally pay a fixed percentage, right? 3.5%, 4%, whatever. And a lot of us take comfort in the predictability of like a fixed fee, right? It's like, I know that I'm going to be paying 4% every month. So at least I know what I'm going to be paying.
Okay.
But what actually ends up happening is, interchange rates, right? Which is essentially the different prices for accepting swipe fees for accepting credit cards. They vary tremendously. They vary from the type of card, so like whether it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, whether it's a business card versus consumer card, versus whether the card is accepted online versus swiped in person. So there's different rates depending on the circumstance. So many of them. But some of them, can be as low as like 2%. Some of them are as high as like 4.5% or something crazy. And so what we generally recommend is what's called Interchange Plus, which means the fee associated with that actual card, right? So whether it's 2% on a Visa, 2.5% on a MasterCard, whatever. And so you're getting the benefit of cost plus, essentially. It's cost plus whatever markup the processor has, right?
Okay.
And so in general, again, talking generalities here, but 9 out of 10 times, the Interchange Plus model will end up being less in credit card fees versus the fixed fee. Okay. So that's so that's sort of the recommendation when it comes to if you are going to continue to take on the cost of credit card fees. Now we can talk about sort of strategies for passing on the credit card fees, right? There's a lot of different ways, different strategies around that, and then also importantly, ACH. So I think we can talk a little bit about sort of strategies for encouraging clients to use ACH, because as you probably know, Dan, a lot of your audience probably knows, ACH is generally the lowest cost form of getting paid, right? It's just much cheaper.
And having those options available, clients want options, right? Do you have any numbers as far as what MSPs are doing, like what the mix is of those that are, absorbing those costs versus those that might be adding it into, the contract?
Yeah. So again, I think it used to be much more common for MSPs to absorb the credit card fees, so just pay the credit card fees. Again, we're in a client service industry, and so adding credit card fees is very different from, if you go to the pizza shop and, you buy a slice of pizza and they charge you 4% for credit card fees, right? So,
Right.
but that's really started to change. I would say in the last 3 years, we've definitely seen a move towards trying to pass on credit card fees to clients. I think in general, it's become more common, right? So I think you see it everywhere now, like whether, and just in like your consumer life, right? You see
Yeah.
credit card fees added to your bill almost everywhere. I mean, I go and pay my utility bill, and sometimes there's a fee associated with it. So I think it's just become much more common, and so as it's become more common, and I think as our clients, right, become more aware of that, more accustomed to paying credit card fees for other services, not necessarily
Yeah.
the MSP services, it's becoming much more common. So now I think in terms of, I would say the vast majority of our partners who are either looking to move from absorbing the credit card fees to passing on the credit card fees, and especially net new partners, right? I think a big reason why people look to adopt, a solution like FlexPoint is to be able to pass on credit card fees. And the reality is, passing on credit card fees is a very, very complex thing. I mean, we can talk about what that means, but in terms of being able to navigate the different rules from, I think there's stat out there. There's like 73 different governing bodies that govern credit card fees and surcharging, and from
Okay.
state to like local government, federal government, to like the card brands themselves.
Okay. Well, I think there was a time where if you were to pass those fees on to a client, they would look at you like you're crazy, and and
Mhm.
they would, like when, if an MSP says, hey, it's just a cost doing business. There's us thinking it, but then there's the client thinking it. But like you said,
Mhm.
it has become so commonplace that it's, people accept it because that's just how it is these days. And
Yeah.
so I think we're in a great place where, it's not like we are in that world, 10 years ago where they would look at you like you're crazy. Others
Yeah.
have done it, others are doing it. So
Hmm.
they've already set the stage, planted the seed, and it
Hmm.
makes it so much easier for us to start doing that ourselves,
Yeah.
without any fear of them saying, "Hey, this is crazy," because
Yeah.
it's
Well,
already.
I think an important thing though to kind of note and be aware is optionality, right? So most of our partners, actually, I think all of our partners, right? So when they do pass on credit card fees, and so we use something that's called surcharging, which we can kind of talk about the differences between surcharging, convenience fees, cash discounts. It's
Yeah,
a whole complex topic in itself, but our partners that do surcharging, they always offer the option to pay via ACH, which to the client is always free. So I think that's an important
yeah,
context, right? So yes, right, I think clients are much more open to paying credit card fees. However, I think having the option to pay via ACH and it still being free
yeah,
to the client is very important, because then that presents options for the clients. The clients can still have a free option to
right,
pay, right, ACH. However, if they do want to pay by credit card, they can continue to pay by credit card. There's just a fee associated with it. And so it's actually really, really interesting in terms of like human psychology, because so you would imagine that if you went from absorbing credit card fees to passing on the credit card fees to clients and ACH, right, and allowing them to pay with ACH too, you would find that a lot of clients would move to ACH. The reality is actually that clients who want to pay with credit cards continue to
okay,
pay with credit cards, like even if there is a fee associated with it. And it's really interesting. We've kind of been trying to dig into this and like why, right? Like if there's this 3.5% fee associated with paying with a credit card, and then you have ACH that's free. Why would you go and not use the free option? Well, it turns out, especially in more complex businesses, right, it's generally a person that has a business credit card. So they're not the ones, right? It's like an
Right.
AP person, accounts payable person. And so they're not the ones, absorbing that fee. So they really, this is the credit card that they use to pay this bill. And so to them, like the fee is not really relevant, right? Versus I think we think about it, especially MSPs, right? We think about it as like, well, when I pay a credit card fee, that's coming out of my pocket versus on the client side, right? It's not always the case. Yeah.
And maybe, and you probably know about this better than I do, but that card might be a rewards card, and so they know that the fee, hey, might have to pay an additional fee. The company's paying for it, but my company gives me the perks of,
that's more rewards, right? Because now you're adding, 3.5% on top of the bill. So now there's 3.5% more bill rewards. Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, we all love Reddit in the MSP industry. So there's these like very interesting, complex like Reddit subreddit threads on like how to the math, right, of like whether it makes sense to still pay with your credit card in terms of like the points that you receive. So there's a whole complex sub industry of like trying to figure out how to like still maximize the credit card points even though there's a fee associated with that.
Yeah. Now you mentioned surcharges. Real brief, how does that work?
Yeah, so surcharging. So let me just kind of briefly talk about like the three kind of main categories, right? So there's surcharging, there's convenience fees, and there's like cash discounts. So convenience fees, we probably see this in like our day-to-day lives at the grocery store or restaurants, etc. So convenience fees essentially says that you're charging a convenience fee for using a credit card because a credit card is a non-standard form of payment. So I'm giving you the convenience of using a credit card, so I'm going to charge you. That doesn't work for MSPs, right? Because unless we mostly accept payments online, right? Our clients are paying us online rather than in person. So paying by electronic payment or by credit card is not really a convenience. So it's really, I do see sometimes people trying to make the argument that it is a convenience fee, but it's really hard to say that your primary form of accepting payments is for the convenience of the client. So so there's this other type of passing on credit card fees to clients. It's called surcharging. So essentially you're surcharging the invoice, the service with the credit card fee. Now, surcharging is very complex. Every state has its own rule. There's a federal law around surcharging. You can't surcharge more than 4%. However, every state has a different law. Some states, like Massachusetts and Connecticut, ban surcharging altogether. So it's really hard to pass on credit card fees in those states. It's almost impossible. Other states like Colorado have like more complex laws, like 2% or the cost of doing the cost of processing, which a lot of people interpret to be very different. And then there's huge technicalities around whether you add it to the bill or you add it as a separate line item, and there's notice requirements. And there's a whole host of compliance that goes into being able to surcharge. However, surcharging for most MSPs is the most compliant approach. So you might have someone that does a convenience fee, and the reason why they think convenience fees are basically allowed in every state. So there's no bans on convenience fees, but it's really hard to kind of fit into the box of a convenience fee. So generally speaking, it's surcharging. That's what we do. So essentially the fee is passed on to the client as a surcharge.
Okay.
Cash discount, it's not really relevant in this instance. It's really you're giving a discount for paying in cash. So that's more for like in-person transactions, right? It's like you go in, you go to the pizza shop and says there's a 4%. All our prices include a 4% fee. If you pay via cash, we give you a discount of 4%. So it's hard to implement that for online.
Yeah, you're not going to have a client, show up at your office with, $15,000 in cash
Right,
for new
right.
server
Oh, even
rollout,
yeah,
right?
it's then you'd have to say, okay, my managed service plan A is $5,000, but if you pay me in cash, it's 5,000 minus 4%, right? So that's kind of how that works, which it's getting a little too cute.
Yeah. So what are some, I guess let's jump into FlexPoint. What are some things that you guys do to help reduce those credit card fees for MSPs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we start at the very beginning, right? So again, going back to what I was telling you about just understanding how big of a problem this is, right? A lot of times, people come to us and don't realize how much they're actually paying in credit card fees. And that's kind of a secondary benefit that they're seeing. But one of the things that we do is, we're able to sit down, take your merchant statements, your processing statements, and be able to run an analysis that shows, hey, this is what you're paying today. These are areas where you can optimize, and I'm not even talking about surcharge. I'm just talking about optimizing your existing processing fees, and that this is what it would look like with us at FlexPoint. And so that's sort of step one. That's one of the things we do. We do that for everyone. Like, it doesn't matter if you end up signing up for FlexPoint or anything. We do it just free service. And then what we also do, right, is we do offer both approaches. So we do offer interchange plus pricing. So again, it's that volume-based cost plus pricing that generally is going to result in the lowest credit card fees that you can find, assuming you want to pay the credit card fees. If you don't, if you want to move towards that model of passing on credit card fees, which we do recommend, we do it in a compliant surcharge model. So again, outside of those 3 or 4 states that I mentioned where we don't, actually facilitate surcharging, so unfortunately, our model is a surcharging. So we do that automatically through our software, and it's all compliant. So client receives a receipt that has the line item. It's all done for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Some surcharging models will run the fees through your P&L, which is not allowed in most places. We don't do that, so we make sure we put a lot of thought into this to make sure that the surcharging approach that you take is compliant, right? Because it's important. And then we have ACH as well. So generally, like I said, so we recommend that you offer both options. So both the surcharging, so clients that still want to play with the credit card, and ACH. One sort of anecdote / tangent here is on debit cards.
Mm-hmm.
So debit cards are a whole animal in themselves. So there's 0 states. So every single state bans surcharging on debit cards. It's illegal, and you can get in really big trouble for doing this. And so it's important, whether it's FlexPoint or any other sort of payment solution, payment processor, it's important that if you are surcharging, that whatever processor you're using can dynamically know that the client's using a debit card. Because if the client uses a debit card and it's surcharged, that's illegal in every state. As an example, with FlexPoint, we're able to see that it's a debit card, and then the MSP has the option of either not accepting debit cards or paying the fee on the debit card. So that's another sort of nuance, but very important of sort of doing this and doing it in a
Are fees
manner.
on the debit cards the same as credit card processing fees, or are they lower?
No. So fees on debit cards are very, very low, and that's part of the reason why surcharging is illegal on debit cards, because it's already so low in terms of the processing fees.
Yeah.
But again, so going back to my example of interchange plus pricing versus fixed fee, if you're paying a fixed fee, you're going to pay a fixed fee whether it's on a debit card or not. Versus if you're doing the interchange plus cost plus model, right? you're paying that much lower debit card fee than you
Yeah.
would be. Yeah.
So you guys can ultimately, because it comes across, a lot more simplistic, but it's still confusing, right?
It's very complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't make it sound too simple because it is
No.
very complex.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do, I mean, it's a great point though, Dan. I mean, it is very complex, but we want that complexity to be simplified for the MSP. We'll take care of the complexity, right? And
Yeah.
that's how it should be. You shouldn't be an MSP trying to figure out, hey, can I surcharge? What can I do?
Right.
These are not things you should be worrying about. You should have someone that worries about them for you.
Yeah. Even if you are on your business versus in your business, still
Absolutely, yeah,
leverage
absolutely, yeah,
resources. Why,
yeah.
try to, assume everything, I mean,
Yeah. No,
yeah. And yeah, I mean, when I
absolutely.
said, it comes across simple as more from a perspective of, okay, if it's a debit card, you're going to pay a little bit less. If it's ACH, it's obviously, a very low
25
cost
cents. Yeah.
option. But then, yeah, I mean, then all the credit cards. But then really, when you talk about the credit cards, those can be all over
Mhm.
the board, as far as what those rates
Yeah.
are. Because if I'm correct, those rewards cards are actually, you pay a higher
Right.
percentage traditionally, correct?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
that's what I mentioned. So it kind of, and this is part of what we do in terms of like analyzing your statements, the types of cards that you accept. But yeah, if your clients, there are cases where, let's say, your clients use very high rewards business credit cards, you're probably going to end up paying close to 4% on interchange.
Yeah.
So it does make sense to that in that case go for a fixed fee that's going to be less than that, right? Because you're
Yeah.
going to end up paying less. However, and I say this very carefully. However, it's very unlikely that all of your clients are going to be using that same most expensive card. You're likely going to have a mix. Some low, some high, and they all kind of blend into
Right.
a lower number.
So, one last question I have before we kind of wrap things up here is in regards to QuickBooks. I mean, obviously, QuickBooks is the go-to for managing finances, and they have credit card processing services available. What's different between FlexPoint and what QuickBooks does?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great question, and we get that question a lot. So I think QuickBooks, and hopefully no one at Intuit's listening in, but I think QuickBooks is one of the worst perpetrators when it comes to make it really hard to understand what your credit card fees actually are.
Yeah.
And then what we think is probably even worse is they take a percentage of your ACH. So we're all familiar with like percentages when it comes to credit card fees. You should never pay a percentage on your ACH. Like that.
Right.
That is just, you should not do that. Like
Yeah.
no business should be doing that. Unfortunately, with QuickBooks, you're going to have that fixed fee when it comes to credit cards, which, as I mentioned, Interchange Plus is generally going to be much cheaper. In terms of being able to pass credit card fees on to clients, my understanding is that you can't do that at all with QuickBooks. So that's something, that's an option that gets sort of taken off the table. But yeah, when it comes to ACH, I think the biggest problem, and what we frankly see, right, when we see people kind of coming from QuickBooks adopting FlexPoint, is that percentage on ACH, right? If you're doing, if you got all of your clients, on ACH, you're doing $100,000 of ACH, and QuickBooks is charging you 1% of that. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I would say, those two things are probably the biggest differences in where we find the biggest cost savings. And again, not to plug FlexPoint in too much, but generally speaking, right, the savings that you see from just, some of these optimizations more than pay for our services. So generally, you find someone who migrates over and they find these cost savings. And so that generally ends up being, a good deal for everyone.
Yeah. And I think the QuickBooks thing, people just assume, I mean, they have you in a corner, right? So,
Yeah.
so for someone that wants to learn more about FlexPoint, I mean, you did mention that you have those free ROI calculators. You can sit down with the MSP, look through their statements, help to analyze it. People can go directly to getflexpoint.com. Additionally, if you are on the everythinmsp.com website, you can search for FlexPoint. We have a microsite there that's got a lot of great information about FlexPoint. You can just click a button to send them a message, schedule a demo, et cetera, et cetera. One last thing that I was thinking about is, just a few weeks ago, we were in Denver at a conference, and we were at the PAX 8 Beyond conference, and you guys were preparing to be part of PAX 8's marketplace. So can you elaborate a little bit more about how you can leverage FlexPoint?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's something, I mean, it feels like forever ago now that we were in Denver. Yeah, I think it's only been 2 weeks since we launched, but as of about 2 weeks ago, we launched in the PAX 8 marketplace. So we are the only payment solution available on PAX 8. So for all the PAX 8 partners who have thousands and thousands of partners, so who work with PAX 8 and who love PAX 8. You can now actually buy FlexPoint through PAX 8, and actually through I believe the end of September, PAX 8 is offering 15% off FlexPoint. So that is definitely an awesome way to buy FlexPoint, but also have a single bill, right? So that's part of what PAX 8 offers, and so you can add FlexPoint to your line card there.
Okay.
As well.
And then actually something just hit me too as far as PSAs. I was talking about QuickBooks, and but the fact that if you're working everything out of the PSA integrations, I'm assuming you guys have some solid integrations with.
So we cover the majority of them. So we have ConnectWise, Autotask, Halo, QuickBooks Online, Xero, QuickBooks Desktop, and we got a couple other ones on the PSI side that will be announced probably in the next month or so. Okay,
awesome. Victor, great discussion. I really appreciate your time. And for everybody out there, thank you so much for listening to us. Again, you can go to getflexpoint.com, go to everythingmsp.com and search for FlexPoint, or you can now also connect with I'm at a loss for words here. Marketplace with PAX 8. So, All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Good, thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.